Hello and welcome to another edition of Cop Talk, Two Jews' Views on the News. I am Bob Cohn, the Editor-in-Chief Emeritus of the St. Louis Jewish Light, and with me as always is the esteemed publisher and CEO of the Jewish Light, Larry Levin, and also with us is Jewish Light Managing Editor Mike Sherwin, producer of this program. Larry, as usual, we have way more questions to consider than our time constraints will allow, and I've even added 3 since I prepared this list of questions yesterday.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Thanks very much.
Thanks for watching. We'll catch up with you next week. But I'll start with one on my original list, and we've talked about this before. Since our last Cop Talk, Pope Francis, 1.5 billion Catholics consider him their spiritual leader, formally recognized Palestine as a state and made the announcement at an elaborate ceremony in the Vatican. He joins some 135 other nations who have recognized Palestine, and several parliaments have recommended that their governments do the same. Is the momentum now in favor of Palestinian statehood, and would it be wise for the U.S. and Israel to drop their objections and let Palestine come into the United Nations?
I mean, there's 2 levels. There's first, do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea? And then second, does it make any difference because of the momentum? Good idea, bad idea, you and I have debated a lot. There's the argument that if they are a nation, they'll have to be treated like a nation with the resultant responsibilities. Other people say they have enough supporters in the region that they won't be expected to act like a real nation. We'll have to see. But in terms of the momentum and the reality, I mean, it's being pushed. It seems hard to believe that it won't get to the point where enough countries, including Western countries, are voting in favor of recognition that Israel and the U.S. aren't going to have to deal with it. Yeah. So you can put your head in the sand and you can object, and certainly the U.S. can continue to veto at the Security Council if they so desire, but it's not going to keep the momentum from swelling.
Yeah, and you've split the issue in a very good way, because for a long time, as you know, I supported getting the statehood thing taken care of sooner rather than later, and at the same time we're on exactly the same page on the momentum. And there's a related interesting story. Unexpectedly, Hamas has been condemned by the Amnesty International for some killings and torturing of their own Palestinian citizens in Gaza. If there were an independent Palestinian state and Hamas resumed shelling Israel or sending in rockets or trying to dig tunnels under Israel, they would be part of a nation state and Israel could declare war on them.
This is something that the international community had better understand. I mean, with great power comes great responsibility.
That's the main thing, is that there'll be a central address and they can't claim to be stateless victims anymore.
It is interesting that the Pope went out on a limb as he did, particularly because we know of the plight of Christians within Gaza.
Yes.
And there are only estimated a few hundred Christian families left, and living there is hardly a piece of cake. So, little surprising that the Pope chose to make that a particular issue at this time.
Exactly. The timing is highly questionable. And speaking of the United Nations and international recognition, and we've written about this, 2 major entities of the United Nations, the Commission on the Status of Women and the World Health Organization, without mentioning any other nations, condemned Israel not just as a violator of human rights and women's rights, but the world's worst violator and the world's worst violator on health issues. So how could this atrocious action be explained, and can we do anything about it?
It really is hard for those who, like yourself, who support the precepts and principles of the United Nations and its creation, to continue to defend in the face of these kinds of things. I mean, it's really a ridiculously political angle that many of the member nations have chosen to use the UN and its various entities as their own anti-Semitic playground in the Middle East. And, what's the answer to it? I think these folks are ascribing everything that goes on in the Palestinian territories to Israel.
Right.
And yet much of what's going on is a direct result of the politically elected, democratically elected powers that be, particularly in the case of Hamas, and how they choose to treat their people. So it's terrible, it's political, it's anti-Semitism at its worst, and there's nothing to speak in favor of.
And as you and I in our lawyerly mode might say, you can take judicial notice of the fact that Israel's 4th prime minister was Golda Meir. There have been women in every Israeli cabinet. and Israel's rescue teams are the first ones to go to places like Nepal and Haiti.
And the kibbutz movement and its egalitarianism and everything. It's just so ridiculous.
It really, truly is. Other news relating to the Israel-Palestinian issue is that Benjamin Netanyahu met with foreign ministers of the European Union, and he indicated a real desire, at least that's what he professed, to move past his pre-election saying there won't be a Palestinian state on my watch, to wanting to re-engage with the Palestinians on final borders. What parts of the annexed territories will Israel retain? The foreign ministers were quoted as saying they were encouraged. The Palestinians said that he's only using that as a delaying tactic. What's your view on it?
You know, he's got some real political tourists because he put together a coalition that comprises folks that some folks that are aggressively in favor of a single state solution, you know, who would just as soon, you know, build hundreds of thousands of units, you know, throughout the West Bank, not only in the currently designated, you know, settlement blocks, but beyond. And he's got to speak with some sort of face other than that to the international community, you know, recognizing that, you know, he's got political peril internally. I don't know how he's going to reconcile those two political objectives. Do you?
I don't know. He's twisting himself into a pretzel because at the same time that he had the constructive seeming meeting with the foreign ministers of Europe, he names Dory Gold as the Director General of the Foreign Ministry,
right?
Who's one of the most hawkish. He's an intellectual and he's written a lot of admirable books, but he's an ultra hawk when it comes to the Israel-Palestine question.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how he can pull that off. Now, the Russian government of President Vladimir Putin recently announced the sale of some 300 sophisticated missiles to Iran. Can we really trust either Russia or Iran as partners in any international agreement?
Oh, if the word is trust, the answer is no. If the question is verify, the answer is possibly. There's never been, and you and I have talked about this, you know, whether or not you deem the United States naive, there's not been any language that I've known of where the president or a secretary of state have based their negotiations or their intention to form an agreement, an alliance between the P5+1 and Iran on trust. They've based it on the ability to verify and investigate far and wide, to be able to go anywhere within the country, you know, to look at facilities and installations. The Ayatollah has said you're not going to look at military installations, and if that happens, I suspect that the P5+1 will say, thanks, but no thanks, you're on your own, you know, because I don't see any agreement without, you know, wide-reaching verification through the country, but it's certainly not based on trust.
And maybe confidence would have been a better word for me to use.
Yeah, confidence, that makes sense.
You have the trial of a Washington Post reporter with dual U.S. Iranian citizenship. It's a Star Chamber proceeding. It's closed from the public. It's going forward, even though the Ayatollah could probably abrogate it.
Right.
The aggressive military actions by Iran and by Iranian proxies in places like Yemen,
right,
and against ISIS, etc. It's a very complicated business.
You know, there's definitely one bright line that I think is very interesting, and that's the one between those who see Iran as religious zealots and those who see Iran as motivated by their intelligent self-interest. And I think those are two very reasonable perspectives on Iran, but they're very different.
Yeah.
You know, many who oppose any sort of agreement, you know, see them as religious zealots, you know, who would act against their own self-preservation and interest. I think they are religious zealots, but I don't think they're stupid religious zealots. And I think they want to exist, and I think they know that Israel has a nuclear arsenal, something that's been in the news once again in recent weeks. And I don't think they probably think that they have the ability to win in any such a Armageddon kind of outcome. So.
Well, historically, the Iranians, as fanatic as they are in the rhetoric, have not been, in effect, suicidal on a nation-state basis.
Right.
So there is that basis for hope. So we see that the Syrian city of Palmyra, with priceless archaeological relics, is under siege by ISIS. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff say that the Iraqi regular army, such as it is a cut-and-run operation. They don't have the will to fight. Mm-hmm. The only ones with the will to fight are the Shia militias. Mm-hmm. Have we, in effect, the United States and its allies, Are we about to lose another war like Vietnam?
Well, I don't know what the war is. I don't know what the ISIS endgame is. Clearly Iraq. Trying in Syria. I don't know where it's going to go beyond that. The big decision that the Allies have to decide is, are you going to spend American and European lives, in furtherance of this battle? That's been an avoided outcome now for the last year and a half. I don't know what our leadership will do. I don't know if our Congress, in anticipation of a war, of an election coming up, a presidential election, an election for the hearts and souls of Americans. I don't know what they will do. And I'm curious what you think, because when it's gut check time, they can pound on the table all they want and say it's being mishandled. But then they're going to have to stand up and say there are only a few ways to do more than what we've done. We've sent weaponry, we've sent resources, we've sent some air support. What else is there to be done other than to send bodies?
Well, I don't always agree with Eugene Robinson, who's kind of a left-of-center guy on foreign affairs issues. But there was a column he had the other day which made the same kind of a case. Do we have the will to expend any more blood and treasure? Should we have more caskets be brought back? Are more people coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder for a war that the people we're ostensibly trying to save don't want to fight on their own?
Right.
So that I have no counter-argument. Only Lindsey Graham and John McCain, and I don't think even they, at this stage of the game, would advocate a massive boots-on-the-ground rerun of like a Gulf War #3.
And here's the other thing, when we fought Iraq and Afghanistan, there was really no imploring of the American people to sacrifice. There was no statement of, we're going to have to tighten our belts, we're going to have to spend less, we're going to have to tax ourselves more. There was no request to give up for the betterment of this situation. There were arguments about why it would help the United States in the long haul, or why the United States must be the world's policeman. But there was nothing that bound Americans together in furtherance of this goal. And now we have arguably, we have an even more attenuated situation, with the exception of Israel, our ally, and people in America will say, why? You can state the case of why. You can state the case of why America has to be the moral police, but the president and others have to say, this is what we're willing to do in furtherance of that. And that's going to require some commonality, some sacrifice, some bond that brings the American people together. Otherwise, I say it's a no-go.
And I really think we do need to be more cognizant of the fact that it's not just there was a decorated hero who came back who sat next to Laura Bush during a State of the Union address. He took a downward spiral due to post-traumatic stress disorder, became an alcoholic, became suicidal. Mm-hmm. There are several military suicides every week in this country.
Tens of thousands of stories like you just described.
Exactly. Yeah. And even Elsie Roth's father from World War I, he got the Medal of Honor due to her diligence efforts. They said he had a nervous disorder, which at the time they called battle fatigue or shell shock. It's the same thing.
If it were enough to say we're morally outraged and we're on the right side of this from a principle perspective, then you have to answer the question, why not the Sudan? Yeah. Why not? And you can make the strategic and tactical arguments, but again, unless America believes that it's important for America to act and we come together to do it, I don't think it's going to happen.
If it becomes absolutely necessary for there to be a coordinated effort to defeat and destroy ISIS, then it has to be, perhaps we should consider reinstituting the draft.
Yeah.
Or having a joint expeditionary.
We don't want to answer the hard questions.
No, we really don't, and I don't either. I don't expect an answer on a short program that we do every month. So, do you have any other thoughts you would like to share with our readers in this season of Shavuos, confirmations, and high school and college graduations?
No, I think one. I think in this year that we've seen with Ferguson and Cleveland and Baltimore, I think summer months are typically more perilous than others. It's really worrisome to see what will happen, and especially how we'll strike the right balance in this country between achieving two goals. One, acknowledging the critical importance of protecting those who are disadvantaged and not, creating terrible life situations where life expectancy is far less for some than it is for others. On the other hand, acknowledging the true need for effective and respectful law enforcement. And it seems like we've had this polarization in the last year where people want to talk either or. They want to either go to the law enforcement corner or they want to go to the Black Lives Matter corner. And in fact, what we have to do is think about all of our issues: poverty, social justice, racial equality, along with respecting those who give of their lives and risk of their lives every day to help protect us. And why can't those be common goals?
Absolutely. Well said. Blue lives matter, black lives matter, white and all other lives matter as well.
Right.
Good note on which to end another program until we come back together to talk about the issues of next month.
Thanks.